Hello everyone, and welcome back to Somatic Exercises by Peter Levine. This is a 12-part series that's based on the work of Peter Levine and his book, as well as audio tracks titled Healing Trauma. It has been almost 2 months since I've done a video for this series. This is actually going to be the final video. So we're going to do parts 10, 11, and 12 all in one today because they are relatively short. A lot of the other videos, especially the ones in the beginning, I really wanted them to be separate. And I think that Peter has them separate specifically so that you can build and develop that skill before going on and moving into the next thing. I feel like parts 10, 11, and 12 are easier to kind of all put in one video. So I've decided to do that. If you are new to this series, I would say go back to the beginning and start from the first video. I'm gonna actually go back through the first 9 videos in a very general way, like just highlighting what they were to orient us to everything that we've done so far. And then we're going to get right into the final 3 stages. So I hope that you all are doing well out there. Like I said, it's been a fucking hot minute since I've done a live, so it's good to be here. Okay, so the first video, just to walk back through these, was safety and containment, finding your body boundaries. So this is where we did the tapping exercise, followed up by the squeezing, which not only, that's a muscle boundary, this is a skin boundary, and we worked to create a connection between the different parts of the body to start to build a sense of self and boundary. One of the exercises I don't think I mentioned in that video is the shower head exercise. I did mention the string boundary exercise where you put a string around you, and that's more of an energetic boundary. But the shower head exercise I didn't mention, and that's where you can use like a detachable shower head that pulsates to do the same thing that you did with the tapping and squeezing. So that was the first part, right? Safety, containment, boundaries. Super foundational to working with the nervous system and healing trauma. The second video was on centering and grounding. Another really foundational piece. So we did the chair exercise, and then we did an animal exercise. The third video is on building resources. So this is where we wrote down what your actual resources are, and then we started to track a little bit within tracking sensation as it relates to the positive resources that we have. So you see we're building containment, boundaries, grounding, centering, resources, and then starting to track in our body based on those resources. So we're going into the sensation channel through positive feelings. The fourth video is tracking from a felt sense. Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah. So the fourth video was just continuing with that tracking skills, but tracking other things other than just positive. And then describing that and getting language to start to flesh that out, right? Because a lot of us don't even have like a very big vocabulary or library of ways to describe what's going on inside of us, because for some of us that can be quite new. The sixth video, am I getting ahead of myself here? Yes, 4. So the fourth one was tracking the felt sense, describing those sensations. The 5th is tracking activation. So you see how we're gradually getting to the point where now we're going to start to track things that might be triggering or activating within our system. And distinguishing, I think the 5th video was the story time, where I walked you guys through a story in your mind's eye and had you track if you were putting yourself in the situation of this main character, to track all the different experiences that would have happened. And that's a really important video, and I don't know that I fully elaborated on this in the 5th video, but what's really important about starting to track these activations is we get a sense for almost like reverse engineering certain sensations and emotions in the body. So a lot of times we're disconnected from the belief or the thought that actually is connected in with a certain emotion, or oftentimes even precedes an emotion. So starting to track these things, we can actually reverse engineer them and go, wait a minute, and then actually use our mind to go, wait a minute, is this actually true? What's really happening here? Later on, we'll see when I get into what we're going to get into today with the 10th, 11th, and 12th steps, that the mind is definitely something that can get really sucked into a vortex when we're dealing with heightened physiology, because that tends to match. And so a lot of this work is using our mind in a way that's productive, and being able to start to have more awareness around our mind and around our thinking as it relates to these emotions or different nervous system states that we're moving through. Okay, so the 6th video was about pendulation. So this is before we were just tracking, right? Positive, then to more activating experiences. And so in the 6th video, we went through pendulation, which is just really the movement between two things. So this is us starting to get into a rhythm of noticing contraction and expansion, that there is a movement. That movement is really important, because that's what starts to discharge energy. That's what starts to move the timeline forward and bring us into the present moment. So I also don't know that I exclusively talked about the VOO, but the VOO sound is something I have a video on under nervous system hacks, where I did the vagus nerve reset with the hands behind the head and then the VOOing. And those are great things that kind of go along with when we talk about discharging activation and expansion, contraction, and pendulation. VOOing is one of those things that can start to shift the physiology, and I talk about that in the nervous system hacks, how it can work for both thawing out freeze and also discharging like fight or flight energy. So it works both ways. The 7th video was where we talked about the fight response, and we went into an exercise around natural aggression versus violence. So we did the push hands, talked about the push hands exercise, and then the back-to-back exercise. The 8th video, we did the flight response, natural escape versus anxiety. And that was where we worked with the chair exercise with the pillow underneath your feet and the pushing. And then in the 9th video, so the last video that I just did about 2 months ago, is the strength and resiliency, collapse versus defeat. And the exercise that we did there was collapse and rebound, which is where you allow the body to complete that response. So we're completing the fight response in step 7. We're in video 7. We're completing the flight response in video 8. We're moving into the collapse and rebound in the last one, which comes up in situations where we feel shamed, humiliated, overwhelmed, defeated. And now that brings us full speed all the way up to where we are today. And again, I'm just really, really grateful to be bringing more of this work forward and just sharing this with you guys in a different format. I mean, this is Peter's work, but to be able to carry that forward. So the 10th part of the Healing Trauma book, and by the way, I'll put a link in my story after this. You can get the ebook. It's very short, and you can also get the audio files, the 12 audio files from him for like $13. But you can also just go through the videos that I have here, because it's all free. The nice thing about the book, though, is that you get the visual illustrations that go along with some of these exercises. Okay, so what are we doing today? The first part is talking about uncoupling fear from the immobility response. So I did a post a while ago. You can scroll back on my feed and find it. It's got a lizard that's up on its back, and the title, you can see in big words, is Tonic Immobility. And in that written post, I quote a lot of different parts from In an Unspoken Voice, which is one of Peter's other books. And it talks about uncoupling fear from immobility. So this is actually a really, you can go quite in depth with this. But I'm going to read you what he has written here. So when animals go into immobility, which is freeze because of threat, the animal's response is time limited. When they come out of immobility, the locked energy is available for either flight or counterattack. As humans, now just like pause there for a moment, because I want you to imagine that a deer or a gazelle goes into immobility or freeze because it's being attacked. And then that threat subsides. So let's say that the whatever was attacking them goes away. There's video footage. We have videos of this. I've seen one where the lion, or I think it was a tiger, went to go get its cubs to feed, right? And then what Peter talks about is that it's time limited, meaning that the freeze response is only supposed to go to a certain point. And so it can be quick, that thawing process, where that energy that was locked up suddenly becomes available again, can be slow or fast. Sometimes you see them pop back up. Sometimes you see more of a slow thawing. But the point is that that energy becomes unlocked, and they're either able to then attack or run. And what happens as humans is that so this is again quoting Peter, as humans, we often find that the energy locked in the immobility response is so strong that we're frightened by it. Now, he doesn't necessarily say this in this passage, but I'm just going to add that I think some of this has to do with the fact that we have ego structures, the way that animals don't. And so those very fragile kind of ego structures, oftentimes not terribly integrated because of our early experiences, I think that causes us to be subject to fearing these responses without having a proper cultural context, without having a proper education about these things. Just the way that our kind of society is set up right now, I think if we were really more integrated and in touch with things, we wouldn't necessarily go in and be afraid of that immobility response. And so there's a way to actually train ourselves to uncouple that fear and to just experience the freeze on its own without necessarily going into the mind and allowing the mind, because the mind energy that's oftentimes associated with the high charge, which is what really freeze is, and it's like the most high charge you could possibly be in. The mind energy that's oftentimes associated with that is also very chaotic, and it spirals and it goes into these really overwhelming, right, which then locks us even farther into the fear. And so part of it is setting aside the actual judgments around the response itself and just feeling our way through it. Okay, so as humans, we often find that the energy locked in the immobility response is so strong that we're frightened by it. The key to completing this uncompleted immobility response lies in uncoupling our fear from the response itself. This allows the stuck energy to be freed up for use whenever it is needed within the body. The forces underlying the immobility response and the traumatic emotions of terror, rage, and helplessness are biological energies. How we access and integrate this energy determines whether we'll continue to be frozen and overwhelmed or move through it and thaw. I love the way that he puts this. We have a lot going for us. We can conquer our fears with the full use of our highly developed ability to think and perceive. We can, through the felt sense, consciously move out of the trauma response. This process needs to be gradually rather than abruptly, and it is best to take this one step at a time, right? Which is what titration is really about, one piece at a time. Oh, brother. I just got locked out of my my account here where I have my book for this. So hold on. Oh my gosh. Okay, my apologies, guys. This is the only downside of doing lives. Okay, let's get back to where we were. Perfect. So the drive to complete the freezing I love this. Okay, let's really drop into this. The drive to complete the freezing response remains active no matter how long it has been in place. When we learn how to harness the power of this drive, it becomes our greatest ally in working through symptoms of trauma. The drive is persistent. This is something I really want to highlight, that your nervous system knows no time. So the drive that your autonomic nervous system, if we're just going to talk about that, but really it comes down to your consciousness and what it's, the spaces it's seeking to expand into. But your nervous system is always persistently going to try to complete these responses. So you have that momentum on your side. The drive is persistent. Even if we do not do things perfectly, it will always be there to give us another chance, right? Our triggers will always be there to give us another chance to work through these things. The key is to uncouple fear from the biological immobility response so that the response can complete itself and work through into a meaningful course of action. Okay. So what happens also is that we start to come back into life because that energy is getting freed up from the immobility response. So good stuff. Let's start to move into completion and returning to equilibrium. So we're not quite into the 11th step here, but this is like a transition. Now that we've discharged stuck energy using the previous group of exercises, like all of the exercises that we've been doing up to this point, we're able to return to equilibrium. But here's the thing. The person who's been chronically living in trauma, which I'm going to say is most people to various degrees, is not used to being in a state of equilibrium. It's not something that we're used to. It's something that we need to cultivate. And orientation, which is a word that if you familiarize yourself with somatic experiencing and healing the nervous system, orientation is something that you hear a lot about, because orientation plays a really critical role in us being present and being socially engaged. And what we know about trauma, right, is it prevents us from being socially engaged and in the present moment and really aware of what's going on in our immediate environment. So when we first come out of our fight or flight responses, we come back into the here and now, and we start to be able to make that meaningful contact with objects, with organisms in our environment. Often, though, we're so unused to a sense of stillness that we don't know what to make of it. And I just want to add a little note here. You know, I noticed I had and maybe you can think of a moment in your life where this has happened. I had been experiencing like a couple of days of just really high levels of anxiety, which is not typical for me. And I noticed like, I had this moment of relief where I felt really calm and just like still, right? Like Peter's describing. And I had noticed this impulse to go back towards chaos, to do something that was stimulating again. And that's sort of a great example of what he's talking about here. Sometimes we don't know what to do with that stillness, and so we will go back into the chaos in favor of maybe just feeling something. So, okay, moving on. For someone who's been traumatized, that feeling, as I was just saying, that feeling of balance and wholeness is such a surprise. It can cause we don't recognize ourselves because we're no longer filled with the same fear, shame, and collapse. As you feel equilibrium begin to return, love this. I suggest well, it said the connection popped out, so I'm going to say that again. As you feel equilibrium begin to return, use this affirmation 2 or 3 times. Home at last. Remember that this is a place of balance and presence, and this is ultimately the place where each of us belongs. Home at last. Home at last. Okay, so that was kind of preparing us to start to move into this 11th step, which is really more us going deeper into orientation. So orientation is at its foundation us moving from this internal experience of us tracking all these sensations and tracking everything that's happening, and moving, we're still connected to our bodies, but it's an experience of ourselves where we're able to, like I was saying earlier, be connected to objects, the environment, and other people. And this is actually a really important part of like a somatic experiencing session, because depending on where a person's at, like let's say going into the internal experience, really for anyone, like too much just scanning and tracking, too much of that for anyone can really be overwhelming, especially if somebody is new or newer to noticing what's happening inside of themselves, right? We really want to titrate that with the experience of coming out into the environment. And that's actually such a natural thing that happens when we start to come back into safety. So when we prompt the being and the body to do that through even the very act of turning our head and scanning, actually turning our head here, right? What is this connected to? All of this is connected to the vagus nerve. And so that's our ventral vagal system is our social engagement system. And that is basically our highest functioning, like we want to be using that if we can, because it's low cost, it's us feeling safe, and it's us being able to negotiate with the world by being connected to it instead of having to shut down or go into these different survival responses. So we're moving from the internal experience back out, and we're kind of prompting that, and we're noticing, we're being curious about where our eyes might want to go. And the other reason why this is so important, or I guess supportive in us coming back out into the world. Oh, I just lost my train of thought. I was thinking about what Peter... Oh yeah. So when we're like looking around, right, we're being curious, we're being exploratory. And it's not really possible for us to simultaneously be traumatized while we're being curious and exploratory and searching our environment. So it also naturally starts to move us out of that state, or at least help us to start to come back to that place of integration and settling, which is really what comes after that orientation. Okay, so during all the previous exercises, you've tended to be focused on what's going on inside of you. As you redo some of them, or whenever you're doing any kind of body awareness or body sensing exercises, practice the following. As you come back to the outer world and your eyes open, because a lot of times when we're tracking, right, our eyes are closed because that brings us further in. As your eyes open, just let your eyes do what they want to do, to look around, to orient. That's the basic nervous system organization that allows for interest, curiosity, and exploration. It's also the antidote for the trauma response. And like I was saying, I'm just going to read Peter's words here to kind of echo what I was recapitulating. The nervous system cannot be exploratory, curious, searching, looking, and be traumatized at the same time. Trauma cannot coexist with these responses. Also, if there is another person around, as you come back from doing one of these internal exercises, you may feel the beginning of an urge to make contact with the person, or simply to look at him or her. That is, again, a natural response. When we're not in the traumatized lockdown mode, our natural response is to reach out and make contact both with the natural environment and the individuals that we have a relationship with. In the words of a Motown song, it takes one to stand in the dark alone. It takes two to let the light shine through. I like that. Yeah, so I've had sessions where, you know, I was working through particular triggers, and trauma can really have a way of sort of sucking us into this internal vacuum where we do feel really disconnected, and we might not even notice it at the time, but it was like once I had moved through that response, naturally I was like, oh my God, I suddenly noticed that there was a person there. Even though I was aware of the fact that they had been guiding me the whole time, I could suddenly like see them again. They came back into clarity, and it was like when I came back out, they could actually feel me connecting with them. And they're like, oh, there you are. Hey, welcome back. All right. So orientation, internal to external, that's the 11th step. And that takes us into the final piece here, which would be video 12. Settling and integrating. Let's all take a nice deep breath. We've made it this far. If you have really taken an interest in these 12 videos, or 10 videos, I guess, let's take a deep breath as we move. As you come out of the trauma response, you'll need tools to help draw you. Oh, okay. Looks like it cut out, so I'm going to say that again. Settling and integrating. As you come out of the trauma response, you'll need tools to help draw you into a new sense of presence and calm. The following exercises, now we're going to get into an exercise after all this mental stuff, can be very helpful in helping you settle into your body and into the present moment. I'd like to share with you, this is what I thought the other thing was going to say. Okay. I'd like to share with you an affirmation from a Native American tradition. I give thanks for help unknown already on its way. I give thanks for help unknown already on its way. Whenever you begin to feel lost or frightened, this affirmation can have a beneficial effect, says Peter Levine. Okay. So let's go through these little exercises. These are settling and integrative postures and gestures, right? As we've worked our way all the way to the end here. So the first one, It's going to be one hand on your belly or solar plexus and one hand here. These are also postures that you could do laying down in bed just to create a sense of settling, right? Give it a try with me. I love this one. This feels really good for me. Okay, the other one is this. This is great for self-hug. I use this when people are needing that nurturing, but I do virtually with most people, not forever, but we'll do the self-hug. So you do one hand underneath here, one on top. Just maybe close your eyes. Notice what that feels like. This is great for containment. Weighted blankets also kind of have a similar effect to this. Can be really settling and integrating. You could just do one like this. I know, I'm going to say it. I'm going to go there. I know that there's men out there who probably cup their balls for a sense of like settling and integration. And women, maybe you cup your breasts for settling and integration, for comfort. The other one is just a chair like this. So I don't have arms on my chair, but you know, any posture that's archetypal, meaning it's or symmetrical. I guess archetypal doesn't necessarily mean symmetrical. So any gesture that's symmetrical can have a really integrative, settling effect. So, you know, making sure you've got both feet on the ground, maybe both feet on the arms of something here. And the last one, which is one hand on your forehead, one hand on your chest. I also love this one. Another reason why I think this is so great is because you're connecting, same with down here, you're kind of connecting the upper and lower half of your body here, and you're connecting your head and your body here, which are oftentimes two things that seem to operate sometimes out of sync with each other, right? So we're reconnecting them. And that's all. I'm going to read you this last little chunk from the settling and integrating. So this series of postures helps you to calm down after being aroused. Practice the grounding exercise, then follow the sequence pictured. Staying in each pose for as long as it is comfortable for you to do so. After each pose, allow time for settling. Notice any changes in heartbeat and breathing. If you experience shaking or trembling, allow it to happen. I suggest that you look at these pictures and practice these postures whenever you feel agitated or uncomfortable. You can also use the postures as a way of settling so that you can drift deeper into sleep, as a way to, you know, when we're moving into our most subconscious realms in the dream realm, right? We want to be settled. As you go in, so you come out. How the consciousness goes into sleep is oftentimes how the consciousness is going to come out of sleep. So being intentional, as intentional as we can about the way that we're putting ourselves to bed. It's the same for anesthesia, actually. How they go in is how they'll come out. So it sounds like he's also saying to maybe even do these in order as like a series, if I'm understanding that right. So that means you would start with this, as long as you feel comfortable, let that settle, then you would move into this, then you might let this drop, then we're going to be like Transformers by the end of it. Do your own sequence. Do, 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 do. Okay. I think that's it. Yeah. I am putting together some things right now. I feel like I don't want to actually speak about what it is because doing that sometimes messes with the flow. So some things to share with you all soon. So stay tuned for that. I hope that you enjoyed this series. Again, if you're new, start it from the beginning. And if you actually go to my feed and you click on the video cut out again, but if that helps, that way you don't have to individually find the videos. Video, tab, series, 12 self-somatic exercises, they're all there. I also have them all on YouTube. So yeah, much love to all of you. It's been awesome to share this content with you. And now let's move into the next chapter together. Bye.